Hello again, my name is Steve Hillis. In this lecture series we're going to look at inequality in America, and we're going to focus on inequality across different generations and how patterns of inequality across different generations have produced some really disturbing kinds of statistics over the last few years, especially since the Great Recession. Actually, there were problems before the Great Recession, but they've gotten worse. And that's led some people to claim that millennials are generation screwed. It's not easy being a millennial. Millennials are the young adults aged 19 to 29 and make up a quarter of America's population. They are the most educated generation in history, but also have the record for the most unemployed in 4 decades. Fresh out of college, in a slowly recovering job market, and possessing lofty expectations about work, the millennial have a hard road ahead. A lot of people claim that intragenerational mobility, has broken down. And we can see that with this little cartoon with the young kid kind of looking up and seeing all the rungs on the ladder seem to be busted, while his grandparents or parents, older generations, are way up on top of him, already at the top of the ladder, and he can't even begin to catch up. Younger workers earn about $10,000 less by 2011 compared to 2005. We see that's true for full-time workers and full-time workers with bachelor degrees only. We see some really disturbing trends, but here we're looking at young grads' average real earnings versus real earnings of all workers. And here we're looking at recent graduates. And the point being is that these younger workers have seen a precipitous decline in their incomes over the last few years. And bear in mind, that's already happening well before the Great Recession, but it only got worse with the Great Recession. At the same time, our unemployment statistics show that younger Americans have gotten killed in the Great Recession. Here you're looking at 18 to 24-year-olds, and there's this huge increase in unemployment in the last few years. Among those 25 to 29, also very high unemployment rates, a very quick increase. On the other hand, as you look at more and more mature as you begin to move towards middle age, 35 to 64, unemployment rates are a lot less, and they haven't increased as much. According to a recent study, 2013, released by Harvard's Institute of Politics, only 62.9% of millennials have jobs, and half of those who do work, are employed part-time. Lots of young people struggling to find jobs or to find full-time jobs. Such low employment rates reflect the fact that so many, 59%, of those aged 18 to 29 have gone to college in the past, although many never graduated or are now going to college. But such low employment figures also reflect highly restricted opportunities for full-time employment for younger people. Here we're looking at median net worth, broken down by the age of householder, comparing 1984 to 2009. Here we have people who are younger than 35. 1984, 11,500 plus in terms of median net worth. By 2009, that had dropped all the way down to $3,662, a 68% decline. Now, on the other hand, when we compare people 65 and older, the kind of geriatric generation, so to speak, elderly Americans, they've seen a tremendous increase in their median net worth, and 42% increase in their median net worth from 1984 to 2009. So clearly when we look at changes in median net worth for older Americans and younger Americans, the patterns are very, very different and frankly very, very disturbing. According to the Pew Research Center, in 1984, the typical household headed by someone aged 65 or older had about 10 times as much net worth as a typical household headed by someone aged 35 or younger. Excuse me. By 2009, this wealth gap had grown to 47 to 1 in favor of older Americans. Again, some huge changes in how older and younger households are doing in terms of wealth. Here we're looking at yet more wealth-related statistics from Pew Research Center. Median net worth broken down by age of householders from 2009. And you can see that, again, the numbers for very young people, people younger than 35, just very meager net worth. But you can also see here how household median net worth increases dramatically with age, and particularly with people middle-aged, older middle-aged, and retired age. They're doing much, much better. So again, some very disturbing patterns in terms of median net worth. Again, similar kind of data here, median net worth 84 to 2009. And you can see the breakdown in percentage changes, how it's broken down by age. That's the reason I threw this up here. And you can see that only two age groups, 55 to 64 and 65 and older, saw an increase in the median net worth. Not so much for older middle-aged people, but a huge increase for elderly Americans. Every other group saw a decline by the time we get into the Great Recession. And the biggest declines were for younger adults and younger middle-aged people. Here I'm just going to read off the little descriptions because it'll speed things up a little bit. It's a little easier to understand. Younger generations are no longer successively wealthier. Historically, what's happened is people accumulate more and more wealth over time. And that's happening less and less over time, particularly with the most recent generation of young people. Younger generations are not gaining over time. Similar data. Again, to really go into this, we'd have to take too much time, and frankly a lot of this data would be a lot easier to read if we had color-coded charts, which unfortunately I don't have with me. But you can still kind of glance at it and go, well, what's happening in terms of average incomes for different age groups, and that's what this is. Well, people who are older, like 75 or 74 and older, they've seen their incomes increase dramatically over time, or pardon me, their wealth increase. Younger people, not so much. And that really does suggest some very serious problems for that generation, both now and in the future. It also suggests that older Americans today are doing quite well. Share of householders with no net worth or negative net worth by age of householder. 3 different years, 1984, 2005, and 2009. By the way, to read these, the top portion of each of these refer to data from 2009. The middle portion of each bar, 2005, and the bottom portion of each set of bars from 1984. So you can kind of see how it's changed over time, 84, 2005, 2009. And again, we're looking at households broken down by age, where they either have zero net worth or negative net worth. Well, what we've seen is over time there's been an increase across age groups in households having zero or negative net worth. That's not surprising given the Great Recession destroyed so much wealth. Nevertheless, when we look at across age groups, it's much worse for those younger than 35 than it is for any other age group. And in fact, 37% of those 35 and younger either have zero net worth or negative net worth, according to these estimates, which again is very, very disturbing. Share of households in poverty broken down by age. Younger than 35, we already saw an increase in that population. By the early 1990s, you see an upward trend, although it's not consistent. There's still something of an upward drift. And certainly throughout most of the 1990s and 2000s, there's a clear upward trend from the early 80s onward. And by the time you get to 2010, 22% of those 35 and younger were at or below the poverty line. For those 64 and below, there was a huge decrease from the 1970s all the way to 2010. And it was only 11% of those 65 and older were living below the poverty line. So the poverty rate among those 35 and younger was double that for those who were 65 and older.